This is what I'm saying.
Well, we have now since been joined by the spokesperson of somebody who's going to be representing the PDP. Dr. Onoha Nachi is a member of the PDP Presidential Campaign Council and also a financial expert. Good morning, Dr. Onoha. How are you doing this morning? We understand that you might have a flight to catch, but let us see what it is that we can quickly fit in before you have to leave us this morning. Can you quickly tell us what is different, considering the challenges that we're currently facing right now, which the candidate of your party, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, hopes to change if he's elected as President of Nigeria?
Morning, Mark. Thanks for having me, and thanks to Nigerians. We cannot be comparing day and night trying to compare Atiku with other candidates. Atiku has given Nigerians a covenant which is so binding on him. We all understand what the word covenant means. And in that covenant, the part one of the covenant is strictly on the economy. Strictly on the economy to show how the economy could be revitalized and put to work. And it is important to know that three key areas was identified as the only way and sure path to economic recovery. And one of that is making the private sector be the leaders of the economic recovery actions. Without private sector leadership, in our economy, government can do nothing. So Atiku has made that covenant, that promise that the economy will be led by the private sector. Unlike what we have today, where we have the public sector thinking they will do everything. That is one key area. The second one is the economic teams and the PDP presidential candidate has said, we will take away that monopoly of a government. Government has monopoly in different sectors. We don't operate a liberalized economy, a liberalized market. A typical government is coming to take off those monopolies in those areas so that the market will be open, the market will be liberalized, private sector participations will be open, and that is very key. Thirdly, we also have made it a covenant in our document that market pricing will determine the trade. When you do a market structure where the government keeps market cost of living, cost of things, cost of that, you will never strive, you will never develop, you will suffer all kind of paralysis that goes with the economy, and that is what we are bringing to the table. These three key things are very important. We're talking about private sector leading the economy. We're also talking about removing the monopoly of government in that and having a market-determined price situation. And these three items that I've mentioned has key drivers to it, key drivers that will make it work, that will make it succeed. A typical key driver that we're talking about is stable macroeconomics. What we have today, inflation rates, you can't talk about it. Forest, you can't talk about it. This is unobtainable because the moment we have such a stable system, certain things will definitely work for us. So, as part of the drivers that will make it work, we're talking about that stable macroeconomy.
Okay.
And secondly, we're talking also to have a PPP structure where the ICLC and BPE will have that power to begin to build our infrastructure stuff based on a PPP structure. So ICLC will be more enabled. BPE will also be more enabled to do that, and that is the only way to go. You cannot operate an economy where your infrastructure stuff is just about 30%. Globally,
but Dr. Nachi, just 1 second. Yeah, just a second. If you can hear me, these are grand plans, you know, if one can put it that way.
Very well.
But then there are those who would also say, hey, it's just the normal thing that politicians say. what is the plan? I mean, rhetorics are good. They are challenging. They are provocative. But then, how emotive will they be? Because it is part of the reason that many people are saying, look, let the major parties just go take a rest, because we've tried the two of them. We are not comfortable with them. For instance, in all of these issues that you're talking about the economic thrust of your party, what is the plan to ensure?
Okay,
just a second. Maybe you rope this in, because this is where my question is going. Because you've spoken about macroeconomy, but there are those who are more concerned about their microeconomy. For instance, the micro, small, and medium enterprises. What is the plan to ensure that the 41 million or thereabout, or 43 million SMEs that have come down, as you know, data goes, to less than 40 million now that are existing, or perhaps even less than that now, what is the plan? What's the assurance that they will remain in business? Because you economists always tell us that it's the small businesses that hold or drive the economy. What is the plan for them to ensure that they not only sustain the economy, they continually provide jobs for Nigerians in every sector where they operate? What is the plan for micro, small, and medium enterprises?
Okay, I will respond to these questions with two clear examples that will make you understand what we're in and what we tend to do. Let me just pick, no small and medium enterprise will survive without power stability. None, because everybody needs power to really operate those small and medium enterprises. They cannot afford the cost of the big dens and big everything. But it will interest you to know, as our plan to solve the solution, when PDP handed over government to APC, what we left with them is what
that you have just mentioned. Just 1 second, Dr. Nachi. Just a second.
No,
on that same issue of electricity that you mentioned, it was under your party that the power sector was privatized, liberalized, whichever word we want to use. And there are several people, including some members of your party, who said that plan at the time didn't work, was not going to work, isn't working, and now you are saying without that electricity, we cannot power our economy. So how are you going to address that? Knowing that it was your party in the first place that started this whole conversation around where we are about the power sector.
You could have waited for me to land, and then this question wouldn't have been necessary. Clear example, as of today, total installed capacity when PDP left government was over 15,000 megawatts. Total generating capacity was about 13,000 megawatts. And then we look at our transmission network was just able to carry about 6,000 megawatts. Now you ask yourself the question, we created the framework and made it possible for more power generations to be economically viable without government involvement as a business. That framework was created. And now, after 7 years, this government that took over could not even evacuate installed capacity or generating capacity to people's homes. And we are coming back to say, first assignment is, how do we evacuate the installed capacity to people's homes? If we can evacuate close to 20,000 installed capacity to people's homes, we'll be home and dry, and then we'll move on. Generating is not our issue. The business of generation, the model has been created. They only just need to have a transmission link that can carry it to the homes, and we make MBET has the capacity to sign the power purchase agreement. Every generating company all over the world, all they just care about, can I have a PPA that work? Once you sign a PPA that work, then the generation will come on. But what is important for us, first and foremost, our quick win is we want to take, within the shortest possible time, take our installed capacity to homes and take it to the industries. Once that installed capacity gets to the industry, the SME will pick up. And I'll take you to another sector for you to pick about it. The agri sector. The Land Use Act is quite long overdue for reforms. There were propositions that were government before PDP left the government. But this government has refused to do anything about it. But let me assure you, if we harness our natural resources, what Article government is coming to do, converting abundant natural resources to national assets. and those assets will be available for development. We cannot run our agro system where over 20-something% of our GDP is dependent on agriculture. It means that 70-something millions are working, but we are unable to feed our nation. So we have done our studies, and we know that the solution is how can we mechanize agriculture. I'll give you a simple example. Today, we still do import chicken. But do you realize that this can be solved within a year? If you have 10 locations, 10 states, establish a poultry farm of 1 million birds, and it can be solved. And we have the plan to do that. We have the intention to do that. How many commodity market? Because what encourages farmers to farm is the ability of off-takers. And what encourages off-takers is the ability to have a market to sell that. As part of our plan, which is contained in our program, we will establish more commodity market and enhance existing commodity market so that these goods can be traded. And the most important thing you need to know about agriculture is ability to de-risk the financing of agriculture.
Mr. Nachi, if I may come in there, interesting yes. Plan that you have outlined, and you talk about increasing or shoring up installed capacity should your government win. Speaking of which, are you going to be, should your government win, are you going to sustain or continue the policy, the Siemens deal of the current federal government, worth over $63 million, for which the government has promised that transmitters would soon arrive? So would your government be continuing with that policy? And then how would you address this faulty tripod of generation, transmission, and distribution started by your government that is still currently not working?
Okay, I will tell you, there's nothing faulty about the structure of the Nigerian power system. It's just about implementation and the will to implement it. One of the things that is very frank and we should make it work better for us is we redesign our transmission network to take the powers home. That's what you need to understand. If the cement project has that component, and by the way, every government, new government that takes over, must review all existing transactions, must review all existing policies of the past government and adapt the ones they need to adapt. Some of us may not have full disclosure of the contract. We only have a disclosure of the technical aspect of it. And we cannot go beyond that technical aspect of it until the full transaction is made available. There's nothing to throw away, but you just can review it and then see where you can adapt it. If everything is good in the contract, there's nothing wrong about it. But after review and you find otherwise, then you know what to do. But bringing it back to this, and I need to make it clearly, generation, Nigeria has set up a model for generation that is perfect and sound. Where we have issues is from our distribution and our transmission. You cannot you cannot produce what you cannot take to the home. I just mentioned it, we have close to 20,000 installed capacity. How can we take it home? It's our concern now. And for any leadership coming to power, if that is not your concern, then there's something wrong. And we have done our analysis and come up with a conclusive approach on how we are going to take this power. The current transmission structure we have is not good. It's not going to run us well. We have a lot of technical losses associated with it. We have a lot of commercial losses associated with it. It is our view that that will be reviewed and a new design will be put in place, because our first target, our pre-need, is to take our installed capacity to our home. And I ask this a simple question for those of you that live in Abuja that are listening to me. During PDP administration, when we took over government, there was only one substation in the entire Abuja. But under PDP administrations, you can count 4 new substations that were built in Abuja. And I do to ask this question: how many new substations has APC done in 7 years? The populations of the cities are growing, the development are expanding, so you're not doing this. And if you're not doing this, so what do you expect? A national grid collapse. You can't take a city that has a population of maybe 2 million and in a year it has grown to 2.5 and going to 3 or 4 million, and you don't do anything. So it's clearly obvious. Development is a continuum, and the process must be followed. And as I stated, give an example of Abuja. When we took over government in Nigeria, Abuja had only one substation. But before we left government, there were additional 4 substations, which guarantees more power to get to home. So our major task is how can we take power to home? And that is what is our first week and our first week. Thank you.
Let me quickly ask you, when you say that you're going to be letting the private sector lead, how do you intend to let them lead?
There are various approaches to let the private sector lead. You can bring the private sector in through privatizations, you can bring the private sector through commercialization, and you can bring the private sector through enabling environments. A quick one. Let me pick another sector and give you this analysis for you to understand. What we have, the total capital we have long term in real estate is very alarming. It runs into hundreds of trillions. We cannot unlock it, but we are coming to allow the private sector. Many of the private sector has made a proposition of mortgage refinancing. Before we left government, we instituted that mortgage refinancing so that the next government can take it and run. But you know what happened? They just dumped the mortgage refinancing because they don't even understand it. Because that's the problem of these administrations. When you see things have been done, you can't take it and run with it. No, I'm giving this example of mortgage refinancing. People have homes that they can even refinance and unlock it and use the money for business and still remains as a homeowner. But because we created a framework, we created the agents, we created the authority to do it, and we handed it over to this government for continuity. You know what? For lack of ideas, for their idiosyncrasies, they just abandon it. So letting the private sector lead, I'm giving you this as an example, the private sector will be allowed to lead that mortgage refinance to unlock over 300 trillions that are tied in real estate in Nigeria today. Once we're unlocking, these funds will go back into the market. I see people running business have invested in assets, property, where the office is, or when they live on. When they run short of cash, they go to the bank, they can borrow money in situations. But once you have the private sector lead in mortgage refinancing as an example, that will unlock the funding and this will become available for it. And that is very simple to do. Government has no business doing business, but they will create the framework, create the enabling environment, and that will make it work. Take an example, if we begin to concentrate our industries in clusters.
Dr. Nachis, I have to interrupt you a bit there, if you can hear me. Thank you for that example.
Yes.
Let me just quickly bring it to Mr. Ali, Mohammed Ali. You have listened to him, and it would seem that from what he has said, it looks like the APC so far has shown some cluelessness with regards to some of the assets that were handed over to it from the PDP. And even ideas which they started and doesn't look like you're able to continue with from the examples that he's given.
Well, actually, if you look at it, the PDP, which was dislodged in 2015, actually handed, if you like, 0 assets to the APC. Why? Because...
That cannot be correct.
Well, you just said so. You know what I mean? When it comes to power, especially, you see that perhaps the PDP have a lot of questions to answer, and some of them are in the public domain. We said it over and over again. For a party, well, I don't want to go that route, but then he brought it up about handing assets to the APC. And now, if you look at the PDP spended a whopping $16 billion on power. But by 2015, when it hurriedly sold the Gencos, what we have now as Gencos, which later on become Gencos and then Discos, what we have now. Yeah, he said something about having installed capacity of 20,000 megawatts. But you see, if you look at it, how did the sales of these Gencos actually impact? How did it improve power supply? Because you can't run away from that. Because it was from that, it was from that going forward that perhaps you have to build on that. And since the APC came, of course, we've had intermittent collapse of the national grid, Why? For a number of reasons. Some of them we know. Because even if you manage to meet that, if you generate that much power, you can't distribute because the distribution lines are old, they are tired, they are exhausted. And then coupled with the fact that we're facing, like, a lot of insecurity there, and, So, but let's look at even the question here. I mean, these assets, how are they? If you look at the GENCOs now, the GENCOs, some of them were sold actually when they were privatized at less than the value. And some of those who, it's in the public domain, some of those who actually invested.
For a number of people who actually know the power sector, they know that the problem is, the majority of the problem, yes, the GENCOs do have issues, I mean, but the major problem is not with the GENCOs. They know that the problem is with transmission, which is still firmly in the hands of government, and also with distribution. The distribution companies do not have capacity. In many instances, they're struggling with funding. The federal government has tried to give it some funding through MBET, etc. But there have been questions as to, if the federal government had not given it, had given itself, put this way, the same funding which it seems to be providing the private sector right now, whether or not the private sector, whether or not government itself would not have been able to do far better than what we're currently seeing.
Well, you see, when you bring issue, you understand, I'm not really in the position now to say what the government, quite all right, is an APC government, but I am not in the government, so I cannot really say to what extent the government has done that much it has done in that aspect. So what I would say is, yes, maybe the challenges in the distribution, like I said, a lot of the distribution lines are aged, they are tired, they are exhausted. Maybe that's a problem. And the discos themselves, the distribution companies, like we know some of them, what manner of expertise have they brought to bear in the distribution?
So there are big questions as to what precisely you're going to be doing different. Because we listened to your candidate there, and he says that, he emphasized over and over again that he wants to bring affordable electricity to Nigerians. And I think that, maybe there needs to be a sitting down, amongst members of the APC Presidential Campaign Council to, drill down on when you say that, when your candidate says that, what precisely does it mean? Because for too many years, Nigerians have had to pay for darkness. For too many years, we've had to run on an inefficient mode of providing electricity, and in many instances, very expensive and also quite unsustainable. That's what many businesses have had to, the model they've had to, adopt to be able to, even make any headway at all. And we know that we cannot continue like this. So there needs to be a clarity on when your candidate says electricity, providing affordable electricity is important to him. What precisely does he mean?
Well, apart from boosting capacity to generate, we're looking at renewable energy as an alternative. A lot of people have not explored that avenue. How do you perhaps complement what you have now with alternative, with green energy is the way to go. Worldwide, people are moving away from fossil fuel. They're moving away from hydro. They're investing. And for countries in Africa, for example, where, if you like, energy, especially coming from the sun, alternative green energy, with that, I'm sure perhaps if you look at it very well, you invest, and then with time, you can have an alternative, cheaper source of energy, which can do a lot of things, especially for SMEs. You can do a lot with renewable energy, with green energy. It will save you a lot of cost. A lot of people have gone that route. In homes, in small businesses, they are using alternative green energy to power their business. But we
also know that the initial deposits that you need, the initial cost of providing the materials to harness the green energy is not cheap. It doesn't come cheap. So there were questions as to how you intend to do that. We're totally out of time. I mean,
well, that's one quick point, Mape, there. Because, look, what the APC presidential candidate is saying that, look, he will provide certain industrial hub at the geopolitical level. And then besides that, they will make funds available, loans available to small businesses so that they can have these alternative sources of energy.
Well, I know that we'll certainly have more room for engagement for both the PDP and the APC and other political parties. Even after now, we're still going to be talking politics. But we have to thank you both. Hope to see you in the course of the campaigns.
Certainly,
It's a pretty lengthy period. Dr. Onohan Nachi, thank you so much for finding time to join us this morning. He's a member of the PDP Presidential Campaign Council and a financial expert. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And Mr. Ali Mohammed Ali is the Deputy Director, Media and Publicity of the APC Presidential Campaign Council. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for coming on this morning.
Thank you.
Well, let's take a break at this point. We'll come back. As I said earlier, we will be discussing politics, some more politics. This time around, what has happened with the Labour Party candidate and the initial statement made by the governor of Anambra State, Professor Chukwuma Soludo. In just a moment, please stay with us.